All right, so number 32, find the distance between each pair of points. So using the distance formula, d equals the square root of x of 2 minus x of 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So that's going to give us square root of 6 minus negative 5 squared plus 1 minus negative 5 squared. So that'll be 6 plus 5, or 11 squared, plus 1 plus 5, which is 6 squared. The distance is going to be 121 plus 36, or the square root of 157, which I don't think will break down any further than that. So leave it there. All right, so then the next one is actually pretty simple because we're finding the distance between these 2 points, but it's a horizontal line, so really you can just count, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Distance equals 8 on that one. All right, 34, 35, finding the value of x. All right, so 34, we look at it. All three angles marked congruent, so it makes it an equiangular triangle. And if it's an equiangular triangle, then it is also an equilateral triangle, which means all the sides are the same. So since we know one side is 6, every other side has to be 6, so x has to equal 6. 35, we've only got 2 angles marked congruent. And the base angles theorem tells us that if we have 2 angles that are congruent, then the sides opposite those angles would be congruent to each other. So 12 and x are going to be equal. X equals 12. All right, 36, measure angle 2 equals 3x minus 11. So angle 2 is 3x minus 11. The other angle is 130. And what we got to recognize is that there are 2 congruence marks here on the sides. So since the sides are congruent, then the angles opposite those sides are congruent. So the other angle there is going to be the same as 2. So to solve for x, we're going to add all the angles up and set them equal to 180. So we've got 130 plus 3x minus 11 plus another 3x minus 11. It's going to equal 180 because both of those angles are going to be 3x minus 11 since it's an isosceles triangle. So 130 plus 6x minus 22 equals 180. 130 minus 22 is going to be 108. Plus 6x equals 180. Subtract 108. So 6x equals 72 divided by 6. Our x is going to equal 12. All right, 37. Measure of angle 2 equals 9x plus 2. Same idea. We got 2 congruence marks, one here and here. So the angles opposite those should be congruent. So the other angle is 2 as well. So to solve, add them all together. 50 plus 9x plus 2 plus 9x plus 2 is going to equal 180. So 54 plus 18x equals 180. Subtract 54 from both sides. 18x equals 126. And divide by 18. And that will be 26 divided by 18 is 7. All right. Find the measure of each angle indicated. All right, so they give us an exterior angle here, 132. The rule is that the exterior angle is equal to the sum of the two non-adjacent interior angles. So this 132-degree angle is going to be equal to angle F plus angle G, or 132 equals whatever that question mark is plus 70. So subtract 70, and 62 is what the question mark is going to be equal to. All right. 39, same idea, just a little more complicated because they threw some x's in there. And so this 19x plus 6, which is an exterior angle, should be equal to these two non-adjacent interior angles added together. So 19x plus 6 is going to be equal to 9x plus 11 plus 55. 19x plus 6 equals 9x plus 66. Subtract the 9x and subtract 6. So 10x equals 60 divided by 10. X equals 6. Find the length indicated. So we're finding the length of H to J, which we know from G to I is 10. G to J is 12. So the difference there, 12 minus 10 is 2. So IJ is 2. And G to H would be 10 minus 7, which is 3. So H to J, though, is 7 plus 2. It's going to equal 9. All right, find the midpoint of the line segment with the given endpoints, 0, 4, and 2, 0. So we're going to use the midpoint formula. X1 plus X2 divided by 2, and Y1 plus Y2 divided by 2. So that midpoint, basically you're adding the x's dividing by 2, adding the y's dividing by 2. So 0 plus 2 for the x's, and 4 plus 10 for the y's. So 2 over 2 for the x, 14 over 2 for the y, which ultimately is going to give us 2 over 2 is 1, 14 over 2 is 7. All right. This next one is one of the more complicated ones on the test. Find the other endpoint of the line segment with the given endpoint and midpoint. So in this case, they're giving us the midpoint, and we're trying to find one of the endpoints. So Each one of these values in the midpoint is representative of one of these parts of the midpoint formula. Right? So -1 is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2. 7 is equal to y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So we're going to call this endpoint they gave us x1, y1. So -1 is going to be equal to, like I said, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And the x1 is going to be -6. -6 plus x2 divided by 2. So multiply by 2. -2 equals -6 plus x sub 2. And add the 6. So 4 equals x sub 2. Now we do the same thing for the y. The y value of the midpoint is 7, which is going to be equal to y1 plus y2 over 2. So 7 is equal to y1, which is -10, plus y2 over 2. Multiply by the 2 on both sides. So 14 equals -10 plus y sub 2. Add the 10. 24 equals y sub 2. So that endpoint is going to be the point 4, 24. All right, so 43. Going to solve for x, which we look at this triangle and we got a congruence mark, and a different congruence mark, and that same congruence mark there, which means that L and M would have to be midpoints. And if those are midpoints, that makes segment LM a mid-segment. And mid-segments, we know, are parallel to the third side that they're not attached to. And they're also half as long as the third side they're not attached to. So LM has to be half as long as ZX. So the length of LM is half of the length of ZX. So we know LM is 2x minus 13, and that's going to be equal to half of 2x minus 4, which is ZX. Distribute the 1/2. 2x minus 13 is going to equal x minus 2. So then solve for x, subtract the x. So x minus 13 equals -2. Add 13 to both sides. X is going to equal 11. All right. 44, slope problem. Find the slope of a line through each pair of points. So slope formula represented by lowercase m. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So x1, y1, x2, y2. Just to label them to keep them straight. So y2, 5, minus y1, which is 14, over x2, 15, minus x1, which is -12. So 5 minus 14, -9. 15 minus -12 is going to become a positive since it's double negative. So 15 plus 12, 27. And 9 over 27 would reduce 1/3, so -1/3 would be our slope there. (45) Find the missing side of each triangle. Leave your answer in simplest radical form. So it's a right triangle. They give us 2 sides, and we're trying to find the third side. So we're using Pythagoreans. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And remember that the C has to be the hypotenuse. So the hypotenuse is 4. So call A the x plus 3 squared. It's going to equal 4 squared. So x squared plus 9 equals 16. So subtract 9 from both sides. X squared equals 7. And then take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square. So our x is going to be whatever the square root of 7 is, which is as simple as we can take that radical, because 7 does not have a square root. Only factors are 1 and 7. All right, 46, state if the three numbers can be measures of the sides of a triangle. So the rule for triangles is that any two sides added together have to be greater than the third side. So 6 plus 10 has to be greater than 12, which 16 is greater than 12, so that works. And that should work for every other combination since those were the two smallest sides, but we can check it. 6 plus 12 would have to be greater than 10, which 18 is definitely greater than 10. So that works. And 12 plus 10 would have to be greater than 6, which 22 is definitely greater than 6. So yes, that could be a triangle. All right, two sides of a triangle have the following measures. Find the range of possible measures for the third side. All right, so any two sides added together have to be greater than the third side. So those two sides added together, 12 plus 6, would have to be greater than whatever that third side is. So 18 is greater than x, or we put it in x first, flip that around, x is less than 18. And then the smallest number added with the x, so 6 plus x, would have to be greater than the biggest number they gave us, which is 12. And subtract 6. So x is greater than 6. So the range is basically that 6 is less than x is less than 18, or the x has to be between 6 and 18. (48) Each figure shows a triangle with one or more of its medians. All right, so medians go from a vertex to the midpoint, and the median's intersection is called the centroid. And for the centroid, we know that the distance from the vertex to the centroid is 2/3 of the total length of the segment. So from G to T is 2/3 of GW. And so and we're trying to find TW, which would be 1/3 of GW. So we can use GT to find GW. So 7.4 for GT would be equal to 2/3 of GW, which we can divide by the 2/3, which is the same as multiplying by 3/2. It's going to be 11.1. Going to be equal to GW, and TW is going to equal to 1/3 of GW. or TW equals 1/3 of 11.1. Which is going to be 3.7. All right, 49 and 50. Each figure shows a triangle with its 3 angle bisectors intersecting at point T. So angle bisectors intersect at a point called the incenter, and the incenter is equidistant from the sides of the triangle. So we know that PW from P to W is 5, and they want from P to X, which the blue lines here are the angle bisectors. And so that point P is equidistant from each side. So if P to W is 5, then actually P to every side is 5. So PX is going to equal 5. And then lastly, 50, WS equals 7, WP equals 8. So WS equals 7, WP is 8, and we're trying to find PS. So if we look there, we've got a triangle, which since there's a right angle over on the right side, it's got to be a right angle on the left side, so that makes that a right triangle that we're looking at. So technically, we've got a right triangle, which is 7, 8, and we're trying to find that right side there. So just plug it into Pythagoreans. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So 8 is the hypotenuse, so it has to be the C. So 7 squared plus X squared is going to equal 8 squared, or 49 plus X squared equals 64. Subtract 49 from both sides. And X squared is going to equal 15. Take the square root of both sides. So X is equal to the square root of 15. Which that radical doesn't simplify any, so X equals square root of 15. So that completes the review.